myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Hi, welcome along to Steve Wraith's podcast. As always, we always like to do something a little bit different at a weekend. I'm delighted to welcome a good friend of mine, Dan Stiles. And it's a name you may be not too familiar with, but Dan has some great credits to his IMDb. And he is a stunt coordinator, a fight director, a sword master. Need I go on? He's somebody who helps make movies happen. And I'm delighted to say that I've welcomed him into my life as an actor. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on, mate. Great to have you on. And I will put the links to Dan's website. idfight.com is probably the best one probably to catch him at, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. So I've given you the build-up, Dan. Let's go back to the start first of all. Just tell us a little bit about your early life growing up. Where were you born, Dan?
Well, that gets complicated. I was born in Hertfordshire, but when my parents separated when I was about 7, I moved up to Merseyside, where I lived until I was 18. So my school years and formative years were all kind of Liverpool area.
And as a child, I've read this in one of your bios. Is it true you were a big fan of WWF?
Yeah, I really liked that. I used to get into trouble for getting into fights in the playground, but obviously we were just playing games and messing around. But I think sometimes they maybe got out of hand, and I was always the one that got told off for it. But yeah, just liked kind of the showmanship and the fun of creating these fight scenes, and obviously at the time I didn't know how to do it safely, so people were getting hurt and I was getting told off for it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, with school, etc. I mean, were you much of a scholar, or were you too interested in recreating these fight scenes as a kid?
I think I was. I mean, I wasn't bad academically. I had a lot of reports saying has a lot of potential, but doesn't fully kind of invest in that. I think I did quite well at most things. I wasn't really the sporty person. I was no good at football. I didn't really get into rugby. I was crap at tennis and all of the typical stuff that you do at school. But when I discovered more kind of adventure sports like cycling and rock climbing and what else did we do? Canoeing, things like that. They were stuff that I really got into. So kind of the more adventure side was my gig rather than the actual normal sports.
I mean, did you have any ambitions at school? What you wanted to be?
I didn't really know. I remember as a young kid growing up, I kind of wanted to be everything. I wanted to be a policeman, a fireman, an astronaut, a medieval knight. Like I wanted to do everything. And I think not that there was an epiphany at any point, but I think I kind of realized that I could do all that through drama and I could do all that through performance and acting. And that was a route that I'm sure we'll get onto, but that was the route that I ended up taking later on after school.
So when I was at school, I obviously took part in in drama. It was an external activity really through a thing called the Young People's Theatre in Jesmond, and I used to go every Saturday morning and learn to do that. Did you get into drama that way?
Yeah, I did some after school classes, which I think at the time was a way for my mum to get rid of me and my brother and sister for a couple of hours. That kind of introduced me to a local theatre company who I auditioned for when I was 15 and started doing pantomimes to start with as a kind of chorus ensemble member, playing like dwarves and dancers and stuff like that and village people. And so I got quite a good experience working with, and they had named actors doing that, and people like decent trained actors doing those shows, and they were all over the country doing the performances. They still exist today, called New Pantomime Productions. And so every year I did that and got quite friendly with the producer, and then we did other stuff, and he did shows in the summer. So I had some shows doing musicals, things like what did we do? Little Shop of Horrors. We did Wind in the Willows. We did Summer Holiday, the old what's his name, Cliff Richard musical. So very different life then, but it gave me a lot of a grounding in theatre and professional theatre, and so by the time I kind of reached 18, when I was thinking about careers, I'd already kind of done a lot of that stuff, so it seemed like a logical way to go.
Did you enjoy the stage, the theatre?
Yeah, I really loved it, and I think it was a bit of a culture shock to get into it as a career and realizing that you don't get all the jobs that you audition for, and it takes a lot of time and money and effort to really pursue that career, and you know, it's as much luck, or more so luck, or networking at least, than talent. So I think that was a bit of a surprise, and I think as a kid you think you're good at everything, and then you realize you're not as good as you thought you were when there's a lot more competition around. So I did drama at school as well when we got to choose our GCSEs, and that was one of my options. We did a play for our final piece, and me and a couple of friends, we did the play about these brothers that go on a bank heist, and we asked our teacher if we could put a fight at the end of it, where the three of us kind of have an argument and get into a fight. And so that was my first introduction to stage combat, which I really enjoyed, and didn't know at the time that was going to be my career.
How were you with learning lines? Did you find it easy?
Yeah, I think it's just like a muscle. You just kind of learn it, you get used to it. I know there were some productions I did where I found it really difficult if I was playing a bigger role. I played Romeo once in Romeo and Juliet, and that was probably one of the biggest bits of dialogue that I had to learn all the way through. We had a lot of late nights. We kind of lived together and worked together, the tour company. So me and the girl playing Juliet, and the guy playing I forget the character's name now. What's Romeo's best buddy?
Okay, yeah.
We kind of had a lot of late nights, kind of running lines together and trying to bounce ideas off each other on the best ways to learn lines. But I think you get used to it over time.
Yeah, everybody's different, aren't they? They've got different ways of doing it. It's as you say, it is like a muscle. So obviously you have that experience. You're at school. You're doing after school activities as well. Does that make your mind up as to what industry you want to go into? And what was your first job after leaving school?
In terms of, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I felt like, the people in the movies, and I hadn't even considered stunts at this point, but all the people that do the big budget films, I felt like that was another world. So I understood theatre, and I thought, I could probably go into theatre and do some stuff in theatre, and maybe that was my job. But I don't think I really knew what my career was going to be, and I was quite happy to just go along with the flow and see what happened. It was actually a friend of mine that said, maybe you should go to London and do drama school and all that stuff. And I hadn't really thought about a plan. I just was like, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and see what happens. And then a friend said, why don't you audition for drama school? So I looked into that. My dad still lived in London, even though I'd moved up to Merseyside. So I had somewhere to stay. I looked at the schools. I applied for a few, got a recall once or twice, I think, but didn't really get any further than that. Then that again was a bit of a surprise. So I was like, oh well, I'm here anyway. I've made my plans. So I moved to London, moved in with my dad, and just kind of got work and found jobs through the actors that I'd worked with doing pantomime, and they helped me get different things and helped me with my CV and my photos, and got me side jobs so I could earn a living while I was looking for work. I think my first normal job after kind of leaving college was front of house in a theatre, which a lot of actors do. So you feel like you're kind of in the industry, but everyone's an out of work actor kind of complaining about being out of work and not doing anything. And I'd use kind of different platforms like the Stage newspaper, and there was a newsletter called PCR where you could get all the breakdowns and write off to those. And in terms of acting after that, I couldn't tell you what my first job was.
Well, with your studies, I guess you haven't learned more than the disciplines that you wanted. Did you have to get out of your comfort zone? I know when I went back into my studies late in life, I ended up having to do, movement and dance. I had to do, you had options which you could take. Did you have to do a few things which you were a little uncomfortable with?
At school, do you mean?
No, when you moved on and took your course at college.
Well, I did media studies at college. And I think, again, the plan was to do drama as an A-level and then take media as a BTEC, a national diploma. But when not long before the courses were about to start, they didn't have enough people on the drama A-level, so they cancelled it. So I had a very last-minute decision to either swap things around and do a BTEC in drama and an A-level in media, or just drop the drama altogether and do the media. And so rather than doing some big changes, because it would have meant changing my colleges and everything that I'd planned to go to, I just went with the media, figuring out that I'd be making films and stuff and I could always act in those things as well. It wasn't that I was losing. Plus the A-level would have been a lot more academic and theory work as opposed to practical. So I was getting the practical, which I really wanted to do. And then at college, we were making music videos and TV shows and magazine shows and trailers and some films and stuff. And it was a great process because it had some good facilities and they had cameras and editing suites and we could hire stuff out at the weekends or in the evenings. And so my friends and I, and one of the friends on the same course was the guy that I did the drama play with. So we used to hire these cameras out and go and make our own films. But back to your question, in terms of going out of my comfort zone, I think the theory side in terms of media and drama was always a part that, I guess just because I didn't have the interest as much in that, I liked doing it and kind of figuring it out rather than writing an essay on how the costumes get made and the history of cinema throughout the 20th century or anything like that. So I think as much as that's interesting to me now, I think at the time that was stuff I didn't really do very well at, but still got a distinction in my college course. So
well done. The other thing that I found interesting was that you were in the Air Cadets, which I guess gives you a whole different type of experience, and gives you some experience that you could fall back on in later life with the stuff that you do now.
Yeah, that was really useful. And at the time, again, it was just something after school. I think a friend of mine discovered it locally and a bunch of us went along. And I was actually the only one that ended up sticking it out. And all my other friends kind of dropped out because they didn't like being shouted at and told what to do. But there were some great opportunities. Again, as I said, I was into the adventure stuff and they'd go out on holidays and we'd do canoeing and we'd go hill walking and we'd go to air bases and we'd fly planes and shoot guns and do exercises at night where like manhunt kind of stuff. And I think I got a lot from it that I still use, and obviously I've topped up that knowledge, but just having that early knowledge of drill and discipline, I guess, in a way, really did help in later life.
Yeah, fine. I mean, I did the same with the Territorial Army, but I think I was one of those who didn't like to be shouted at. I've got to be honest. It was a bad career move for me. I didn't last too long in that, but at least I gained something out of it, which was good. So obviously for you decided to pursue the job as an actor, which you've already pointed out is such a hard career to follow. Anybody asks you, and I'm sure I give the same answer, is be prepared to be able to do something else, because you can sit around a long time doing nothing as an actor unless you're very lucky to get to those levels. But you did decide to continue your combat training. So clearly the love for fighting, which you'd displayed as a youngster, with your love for WWF, which of course is now WWE. You've gone on to you've gone on to do different arts. Which particular arts did you enjoy? Which training did you enjoy the most, and which combats and martial arts did you enjoy the most?
Well, I started out more into the sword fighting. I think I was most infused by the kind of heroic characters, and all the historical films like Gladiator and Robin Hood and Lord of the Rings and things like that. So sword fighting was really a thing that I kind of found like this super thing that nobody else did. I saw some reenactment when I was about 17, 18, and I looked into that and joined a reenactment group which did Viking historical living history stuff. So kind of learned my sword fighting in that, which was much more realistic or real anyway. It was, they had rules about you couldn't hit someone over the head with a metal sword, but there was no choreography. You were really fighting with someone. You were just pulling your shots, so we weren't doing damage, and people had padding on and armor. So I had that side of it, which again I think was great experience going into the world that I eventually came into, because I understood what it's like to face someone with a sword and not really know what you're doing, and having to fight not for your life, but trying not to get injured. So your parries were real and your attacks were kind of controlled, but you were trying to hit the person. So I understood the competitive side on that respect. I also was doing fencing through like holidays and activity camps and stuff. So I think all of those sword skills, when I went into doing stage combat training as an actor, I think they just meant I picked stuff up very quickly. And of course, the things that you're good at, you tend to enjoy a lot more. It wasn't until later that I really got into martial arts. And even first, I was probably doing boxing first of all, because someone I knew, a filmmaker, wanted to make a boxing film, which never actually happened in the end. But I decided I was going to go and get some boxing training, and kind of stuck at it for quite a long time. And since then, I've done a lot of choreography for boxing, which again, that training really helped. But the academy that I trained with as in stage combat was called the BADC, or the British Academy of Dramatic Combat. And they had workshops throughout the year where they'd have guest instructors, and we had people come in and teach us. We did judo and ninjutsu and kendo and a bunch of other stuff that I forgot. So I kind of had tasters of lots of different martial arts, and obviously people you meet along the way, you kind of have a skill swap or a training session where you're like, okay, tell me what you know. So I've done bits of lots of things, but boxing was probably my main one. And then more recently I did Sanshu Quan, which is Chinese kickboxing, and I eventually got my black belt in that, but that was much more recent.
Yeah, I mean, the acting side of things, I've already pointed out, it is quite difficult. Did you find yourself, doing a few short films, etc., just to get the experience, doing stuff with friends and helping people out to try and get those much needed credits on your resume?
Totally, yeah. So early on, as I said, in college, my friends and I used to hire out cameras and write our own scripts, and we'd act and direct and do everything ourselves. And then when I went to London, a lot of the stuff I was doing was kind of student films and low budget films. And on those kind of levels, they didn't really have a stunt coordinator or anyone kind of managing stuff. And maybe it was my look or my experience, but a lot of times I'd be cast in thugs or soldiers or people that kind of ended up doing stunts or fights. So I was either doing it myself or I was choreographing for me and other people. So that also helped, again, down the line, that helped with my credits in terms of choreography and coordinating as well. But yeah, I was doing a lot of low budget stuff as an actor just to get footage and credits.
When did you first decide that you would want to get involved in the in the coordination of stunts, etc.? Because being an actor is one thing, but then deciding to be on the other side of the camera, helping people achieve what they want to achieve on camera is a different move. When did you really think that's what I want to do?
Well, it took a while, I think, because when I trained, I was very much, I wanted to be an actor, and I didn't want a distraction. And I also knew a lot of other fight directors and people who had trained me and taught me. And so if for whatever reason that someone approached me about choreographing for something, I'd usually give it to someone I knew, one of my teachers or instructors, and say, well, get them to do it. And if I could, I'd assist that person. I'd say, well, do you mind if I come along and help you out? Which was great experience, again, down the line, because I got to see how they worked and saw the process. But when it was very small stuff and theatre and film, a lot of the time I was just choreographing to help them out, because I was one of the people in the fight and the other person didn't really know what they're doing, and they couldn't afford to bring someone in. So I was like, well, I'll choreograph for you and kind of make it work. And so it was only after quite a long time that I was doing all this work as a choreographer, but wasn't really thinking about that in terms of a job. And then chatting to other fight directors, and there was a lot of politics because, the fight directors don't want people coming up and taking their job. So a lot of people are going, oh no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that. And then other people are saying, well, you are doing it. So you can't, no one can say you're not allowed to, because you are doing it. And there's no rules about doing it or not. And I was a bit afraid of doing it because I was worried I was going to get into trouble with somebody. And it was one guy called Tony Wolf, who was quite a high coordinator at the time. He'd worked on stuff for Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. And he was like, well, no one can stop you. There's no law against it, and you're doing it. You've already done quite a lot of it. So you should consider doing more. And if you're good at it and you like it, then take it seriously. And I look back at my kind of the stuff that I'd worked on and realized that I had actually done quite a lot. And if I thought about what I'd learnt through that process, I knew quite a bit, and I think I could trust myself to be safe and to make sure I knew what I was doing. And I was maybe just imposter syndrome was kind of pushing me down. And it still took a while that I kind of tried to do both, and I started applying for more stuff and taking on more stuff, and I trained to be a teacher in stage combat, which was a 2-year process with the BADC, where I had to do a lot of work. I had to apprentice under other fight directors and teachers, and I had to write lots more essays. It was a bit like going back to school, and be assessed on my teaching and be assessed on choreography and written work. But that was invaluable in a process of turning from a performer into a fight director and a teacher. And I think it gave me valuable understanding of how to work with actors, about how to create choreography and adapt choreography to make it work for certain actors or certain situations that might arise. It gave me a lot of historical knowledge, a lot of artistic knowledge through the written work that we had and research that we had to do. And so it was a process of all those things kind of aligning, where I finally thought, oh, well, I'm giving a lot of this work to other people, and maybe I have got the experience that's necessary or the understanding and the skills. I from then, when I started to take it more seriously, then the career kind of took off.
Fantastic. I mean, it's. I think the one thing that stands out with you, Dan, is that hard work certainly does pay off, but you get nothing in this life for free. And I think anybody watching out there who's got the feeling, well, that's what I'd like to do, I'd love to be involved in that. It's easy. First of all, it's not easy. It takes a hell of a lot of work to get to where Dan has got, and more credit to him. I mean, obviously, I want to concentrate on Rise of the Foot Soldier 3 because we work together. That's we were involved in Harrigan, but we didn't come across each other up in the northeast. But Rise of the Foot Soldier 3, part of a franchise, a very successful franchise, and I've spoken about it on the podcast before. I was lucky enough to be cast in a role down there. Went down a couple of weeks before filming to go and choreograph the actual fight scene with you. And from your perspective, just take us through it, because it's a question I've never asked you. But you get the script. You know how that scene, how the director wants that scene to look. What's your process? From getting the script and saying, right, we've got a scene in a prison. We've got actors 1, 2, and 3 who are going to have to fight. How do you lay it out? Because just to paint a picture for people as well, on screen that looked like a prison cell. And looked like a prison gym, that scene there. But it wasn't a gym. It was a very small space to work in. And, it wasn't the biggest of spaces. It was down next to the Peacock Gym in London and the studios down there. And this gives you a bit more of a clear idea of the kind of size of space we were working in. It was very, very small, but the set hadn't been built when we were down there. So give us it from your side, Dan. What do you have to do from that perspective to getting the script, to putting it into action, to getting it on screen?
So I remember there were a lot of fights in this production, and I was lucky to be able to bring in a few guys to help me out. And prior to the production, we got together and looked at all the different fights and kind of worked them out of how we might do them as per the stage directions, as per what the director wanted it to look like and feel like. Obviously, with Rise of the Foot Soldier, we're lucky to know the characters in advance. So I knew who I was dealing with, apart from your characters. But the script told us a bit more about your characters. But especially when it comes to Pat Tate, you know who he is and you know how he does things. So we kind of walked it through, and during our rehearsals, I'm talking with art department to kind of throw ideas back and forth. What can we get in terms of props? Can we have rubber weights? Can we have a weight bench that we can use? Can we? How big's the set going to be? Where can we place things to allow the choreography to move around? And we're kind of passing information back and forth as we're creating the choreography. I'm then talking to art department saying, well, we'd love this space here, or we'd love to be able to get between 2 pieces of equipment here. Can we have the weight bench here? Can we have a stack of weights over here so that Pat can pick them up when he comes in and things like that? And then it's just an organic process that just builds as these pieces start adding together. And, there might be a curveball where art department or somebody else is like, oh no, we can't get that, or we can't achieve that, or we don't have the money for that. So then we have to change that and work it out. Yeah,
it's amazing. I mean, the process as well it's about angles, isn't it? The camera angles are very in particular. And I think people don't believe it when you say, to get maybe a 2-minute scene, it can take anything up to 4 or 5 hours, and it's dependent on the actors. Who have to listen to your choreography. It's dependent on, whether the director is happy and with the shot that he's got. Everything comes into it. And as you say, there are always pitfalls along the way, aren't there, which can change direction of things.
Yeah, totally. And it's no one's fault, but it's something that comes up. So as a performer and as a coordinator, you just have to be able to adapt in the moment. And if something goes wrong, or if something needs to change, whether that's because the actor's struggling with it, or because the set doesn't allow for that, or the camera can't move in a particular way, then you've got to be able to change it quickly and efficiently and communicate that to everyone and move on. Because obviously once you're there, time is money, and we need to get it by a certain time.
Yeah, and look, as an actor, I can explain to most people it can be boring at times standing around listening. But I think what we found on that particular set, and we've spoken about this, Andy and I, on a few occasions now, is you must listen to what people are saying. And unfortunately, we had a bit of a situation on set in one of those fights where Andy didn't listen to the direction that he was supposed to be going in. He switched off, didn't he? And he ended up copping for a bit of a black eye, a bit of a shiner from Craig Fairbrass.
Yeah, which is unfortunate for everyone involved, and I was horrified by that. And it's not a nice thing to happen on set. It was a freak accident, and unfortunately, when you're doing fight scenes, there is small room for error in terms of once you're getting into the choreography. It's really down to the actors, and I can choreograph it as safe as I can, and I can allow for gaps and make sure the camera's in the right place so that the actors don't have to be too close. In that occasion, unfortunately, Andy just stepped into the space that would have been the safe space, and he came too close. Craig was already throwing the punch, and Craig, he's been around doing a lot of these types of characters, and I trusted him doing the fights, and it was just a bit too quick and a bit too late for him to pull the punch. So Andy bore the end of Pat Tate's fist for that one. Yeah, luckily Andy was all right, and he was able to continue with the film, and I thank him for taking it so well. Yeah, we managed to get around it with. We obviously changed the choreography from that point because Andy had to be dealt with for that moment, and we were able to move things around and use a double for a few shots, and we got the shot, and Andy was okay, so everything turned out okay.
Yeah, it's the big thing. You've always got to listen, and that's why I respect people like Dan ultimately, because they put a lot of hard work and effort into these things, and it costs us nothing just to pay attention as actors and listen. Have you got a particular fight scene that you're really proud of, Dan?
Well, I guess I've got to mention the one that was nominated for a Stunt Taurus Award, which was Avengement, which is the film behind you right now. So not the fight scene behind you, but at the end of the movie, there's a big pub brawl where one guy, played by Scott Adkins, who's already an amazing fight performer and actor, takes on a room of, I can't remember now, 8, 9, 10 guys in a big, long pub brawl with weapons and fists and tables and all sorts of stuff getting smashed up. Yeah, that's another one from the film. Yeah, so it took about 3 days to shoot. We had a great team of performers and Scott, so I couldn't have asked for a better team to make it look good. I think it was shot really well. The sound design was really good. The editing was really good, and it was just a sum of its parts. Obviously, Jesse Johnson, the action director, was directing the whole piece, and just in terms of the setup to the fight, it all kind of led to a point where the fight made sense, and everyone's rooting for him at the fight. So the story and all those parts just led to this being quite an intense and brutal fight scene. And the year it came out, or the year after, it was nominated for a Taurus Stunt Award, which is kind of like the Oscars for stunts. So we were all really, really proud to have been involved with that, and my team were nominated as the performers, we couldn't have wanted for more. We didn't win, but we were up against the likes of the Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I can't remember what the others were, but we're up against the big budget movies, and we just we didn't quite make it that time, but we were all pleased to be involved.
What's been the trickiest stunt to coordinate? Trickiest fight to coordinate? I mean, I can imagine using swords. I mean, you're well accomplished to doing that, but if you get an actor who's on set, who's never done that before, then I can imagine it must be very difficult, because it's one thing throwing a right hand and feigning an injury to that, but swords bring a different dimension into it. But you might have something different.
In terms of tricky, I think the hardest ones are where you're trying to make something look as close to reality as possible, because a lot of, particularly nowadays with the way films are going, and maybe 20-30 years ago you could get away with something not being too realistic because people weren't as familiar with martial arts, people weren't as familiar with just seeing that kind of fight scene on the screen. So now people are seeing like very high impact, very high production value fight scenes, and that's what they expect of everyone. And when you're going for real particular realism, you've obviously got that fine line between entertainment and safety, where you're trying to make it look as good as it possibly can be, which real fights don't tend to look very good because it's just a mess. Because even if they do know martial arts, that tends to go out the window when you're actually in a real fight, and people are falling over, and there's accidents and misses, and it's not very exciting, and it's not very easy to follow. and then you're trying to tell a story that is the opposite to all of those things. And then you've also got the safety element where the messy kind of stuff and where people are falling over and everything is actually much harder to do while it's still safe, which is why a lot of the older fight scenes looked very choreographed, and it had kind of a particular rhythm to it, and everyone seemed to know where they were coming in, and you get, one person at a time is always getting involved in the fight, and it's much harder to do stuff with multiple opponents and looking messy. And I try as much as I can to make it look like people are making mistakes, or there's accidents, or there's surprises that are unexpected in the fights, just like a real fight might kind of throw you and surprise you. But it's just hard. It just takes a lot of rehearsal and training for the actor, and there's not always the time to do that. So yeah, I think I mean, Avengement was one that was tricky, but on that one at least I had good performers. I'm sure there's lots of others where I've had that kind of brief, but the performers haven't been up to that standard, or I didn't have the time to kind of put something together to really get as close to that real stroke safe as possible.
Is it a competitive industry for you in teaching this, or is it quite a niche market?
I think everything's competitive in its own way. I mean, there are competitors. I think on my way up, there wasn't a lot of people doing it for very low budget because they wanted to get paid more money. So I think the growth through the kind of short films and the low budget independent films was quite good, and I think people recommended me quite a lot for that period. I think now I'm up against kind of a much more experienced and much more higher level of stunt coordinators and fight coordinators, then there's definitely a lot more competition and people with far more experience than I have. And then I think it just comes down to personal style, connection with whoever's hiring you, and it's as much as talent comes into it. I think they're just looking for something that they can work with. So yeah.
With actors or directors or writers, you often pay homage to somebody who you admire. You might put a little scene in which is something which is a doff your cap moment to a particular scene that you've been influenced by. Do you do the same with fight scenes? Is there a particular fight scene that you've watched, maybe when you used to sit and study those martial art films back in the day, and is there something you've gone, I might just try that, I'd love to use that?
I think we're all influenced by everything, and there's sometimes that I choreograph something and I look back at it and then I can see, oh my god, I've just done exactly what I just saw something else the other week, and I'm like, oh, I've got to take that out because that's literally, I've just copied the choreography, or but it's in my head, I've not done it intentionally. And there's other times where I'm intentionally going, oh, let's put in a bit of Jackie Chan or a bit of Die Hard, or let's not necessarily a homage, but let's use that style or the effect that they were able to achieve by doing a series of events or a particular technique or move where they were able to make the audience feel a certain way, and we'll either try to recreate that or kind of do it in a similar way. I love Jackie Chan. It's kind of far removed from the stuff that I'm doing a lot of in terms of the brutal and more realistic stuff, but I love using props, and I love kind of how to utilize the environment, and I try to do that as much as possible. What else do I take reference from? I love Korean films. I often, when someone's asking for that dark, brutal kind of style and theme, I often refer to Korean films because they're just nasty, and again, they don't always tend to be martial arts films, so it's people that aren't highly skilled and can kick and punch and do all these combos. It's people that are kind of tired and exhausted and already injured and in pain, and they're trying to throw punches and they're falling over and they're tripping over the set and bits and pieces, and yeah, that's kind of what I'm most interested in.
I mean, I grew up in the era of water margin, monkey magic, and stuff like that. I mean, there was all kinds of martial arts stuff on the UK TV back in the 70s and 80s. So it is fascinating in different styles. So obviously, from fight director, sword master, and stunt coordinator, you're still learning to this day. How is the progression going with regards to the British Stunt Register and the fight director register, which you were pushing for?
Yeah, it's tricky with those things because life always gets in the way. I was kind of looking at doing some extra skills and learning some of the stuff for the British Stunt Register, which is you basically have to do 6 disciplines, which are a number of different sporting and agility kind of skills. So trampolining, high diving, scuba diving, rock climbing, things like that. So I was kind of working away at some of those. The fight director's register requires you to be a fencing coach, so I was working on that. And then 3 years ago I had a baby, which threw everything up in the air and just found myself with absolutely no time and no energy even when I had the time, and obviously more importance on having to earn money and having a lot more expense that you're having to make money for. So yeah, it kind of put everything on hold, I'd like to say. So now she's a bit older, I'm trying to kind of find that space again, but work comes along as well, and if I get a production, I might be busy for months or weeks. So when I'm particularly busy one thing after another, then it's very hard to fit much else in.
Yeah, that's the difficult part, balancing your life as well. As you say, things do unfortunately get in the way. Currently, are you working on anything at the moment?
Yeah, I'm just about to go into production, or they've already started, but I'm not on until next week, on a sci-fi thriller, feature film, and talking with some other producers about stuff that might happen shortly after that. One could be a Roman period film, which goes back to my sword work, which I don't get to do a lot of, so quite excited about that. Hopefully that goes ahead. And then a couple of different options for things later in the year, both of which would be very exciting, with teams that one with a team that I've worked with before and one with a new team. So both kind of exciting and interesting, and with some new challenging things that I can't wait to get involved in.
Which do you prefer, fight choreography or stunts?
Fight choreography.
Yeah, that was without hesitation. I mean, is stunts a little bit more, once it's done kind of thing, and you're recreating something like this particular image, and it's quite simple. Is that why? Is there a reason why?
I think it comes down to character and story, and that, and kind of going to my background and my roots. It was all about the fights early on, and I think what inspired me with the fight scenes is how it makes you feel, and the progression of the character and the story throughout that, and the heroism in, I mean, not all fights are about heroes, but the emotions and the roller coaster ride and the ups and downs that a fight can tell, the story of a fight in itself, and how characters change in a fight. With stunts, as much as they can be amazing and exciting, and sometimes feats of athleticism and engineering and all sorts of things, that doesn't give me quite the same feeling in terms of emotion and drama and character and story. I think those are spectacles, and while I'm not saying that they don't have any character or story whatsoever, they still have to be part of the narrative and feel like they come from, a reason. There's a reason for it, and they come from a place that makes sense within that story. I feel like fights just give you so much. There's so much more, emotion, and it's more visceral, and there's you can tell so much more with a fight than you can with someone falling off a building or being set on fire.
Yeah, no, 100%. Okay, at the start of the interview, I did mention your website, idfight.com. And if anybody goes there, I'll stick the link down below. It's a really well put together website. It's got a training diary on there, combat labs, stage and screen combat, stunt, supportive skills, firearms. Obviously, a little bit about the guys who were involved. The company, that was obviously something that you decided to set up, and how's it going, and let us know a little bit about the training courses.
Yeah, so that was something I set up with another fight director who we met quite a long time ago when I was doing theatre stuff, and he was actually a fight director on a production I was acting in, and I think he'd just done his teacher training and I was about to start mine, and he'd set up this company to kind of help with doing workshops and stuff, and we kind of got chatting and got friendly, and we'd share gigs, and he'd come on my gigs and I'd go on his gigs, and then we decided we'd work together. So we set it up as a training provider, starting out just doing stage combat, and then that kind of progressed into developing a screen combat side of it. We started doing firearms, which again comes from the background with cadets, but also doing a lot of stuff since then. We're now doing wire work classes, which we've got one coming up in a couple of weeks. We've had stunt skills like horse riding. We did a stunt driving course just before lockdown, I think. What else do we do? Combat Lab is basically like a weekly session where people can just come and train, and it's a different skill set or a different theme every week. And that's on a Sunday evening. And that was really to kind of give people something to just keep coming to so they can top up their skills and keep training. And then we have our syllabus courses, which are the British Academy of Dramatic Combat and also the British Academy of Stage and Screen Combat. And they're more specific to a certain weapon system. So you might do rapier and dagger, which is like the Shakespearean Elizabethan style, or you might do sword and shield like Vikings, or you might do a two-handed broadsword like a medieval knight. And each one you do a few days, maybe a week of training in that particular style. You'll get all the technique, you'll get all the footwork, the parries, learn a choreography, and then at the end of the week you will do an exam, which is basically a performance of everything you've learnt in front of an external examiner from the academy, who will then judge you both on the technique, the safety, and the performance, and you'll get a final grade, and that is kind of recognized by Equity and Spotlight, and other actors and producers and casting directors know what that means if you have a certain grade at a certain level. So it's great for actors to kind of use on their CVs that they've at least used a sword before, and often that will be the difference between getting a role or not getting a role if it requires a lot of choreography.
No, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating industry, Dan, and you know, from my perspective, I know how hard you work, and been a pleasure to work with you, and hope we'll work with each other again. Anything else you want to push and promote before we finish there, mate?
I'm terrible at self-promotion. I mean, I'm on Instagram as Action Dan Styles, on Twitter as well. I think it's the same. I've got a website, but it doesn't really do very much. It's just kind of a placeholder for a bunch of posters and contact details.
idfight.com is the best place for people to go,
yeah.
I guess, for information, Dan.
Yeah, for training and everything else, that's the best place to go. For me personally, I tend to put work on Instagram most of the time, but I'm not very good at that either. So,
you're too busy with a baby.
Yeah, that's exactly why.
Dan, listen, I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for your time. As I say, I did catch up a bit of promo that I saw the other week, and I just thought it'd be great to get you on, help you give a bit of a push. Knowing that you're not very good at self-promotion, I thought that was a good idea. But Dan, thank you so much for your time, mate. Look forward to catching up with you soon. Take care, mate. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you.